Hoi hoi, this is Michaela from Team Retro, where we like retro games and we like the devices that bring them to us. So today we're doing a different type of project. At this point, I have over 20 different retro gaming handhelds, and I also have a collection of retro games from various systems from my childhood. And up until recently, I've been programming most of my retro handhelds the same. And so I thought, what if I took some of these handhelds and I actually used them as a playable museum for my physical game library? And so that's where this little device comes into play. And they even sent me some candy, which is actually pretty cool. This is a cartridge reader from Save the Hero Builders. And this actually uses some pretty nifty chip technology in order to read your physical game cartridges and save them as ROM files on a micro SD card that you could then transfer to one of these emulation devices that we cover on this channel. And a lot of those old cartridges like NES, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, they're all battery-based saves. And so what this device also lets you do is it also lets you rip your save files from your original cartridges, and so you can preserve those saves well before your in-cartridge batteries die. So let's go ahead and see how all this works. Let's dive in and let's get to work. Really quick, I wanted to give a shout out to two Discord communities, and I want to start with the Steam Machine Podcast. And Steam Machine Podcast is part of a bigger community called TSMP Productions. And Team Retro has joined that umbrella that is absolutely not a cult in any way. Dalton, Willie, Nate, Jeremy, and the crew over there are actually super cool people, and their content is amazing. And if you join their Discord channel, you'll find there's a Team Retro section where you can actually talk to me. So shout out and thank you to TSMP Productions for taking me under their wing. And the other community I want to bring up is Retro Handhelds. And Retro Handhelds is a massive community of people who like these retro handhelds that we cover on this channel. And I recently talked to Stubbs, one of the heads over at Retro Handhelds, and he added me and the channel to their list of YouTubers and was really nice and professional about it too. Really good guy. And there are a lot of people in that community that can help with your retro device of choice if you are having trouble. So definitely check them out, and I'm in there as well. I'll leave a link to both Discord communities in the video description on all of my videos from here on out, so definitely click those links and head over to those communities. So let's take a closer look at the device itself, and in order to do that, we need to take off this contact paper that the device ships with. It was surprisingly stubborn to take off, but once we did, we revealed this really nice acrylic base that protects the chips underneath that powers this device. And so on the bottom here you have a Game Boy slot as well as an SD card slot, and on the top you have slots for N64, Sega Genesis, and Super Nintendo, with an N64 controller slot in the back to read N64 memory cards. And on the sides here you have various switches that you need to turn on or off depending on what game cartridge you are trying to read. And on the bottom, you could see this is actually powered by an Adafruit chip, and that's what allows us to read our special SNES games, our SA1 games, and our Super FX games. And the top also has directions on how to set up each switch for each system, but there is also a business card in the packaging with a QR code that leads to the user guide, and I highly recommend you do look at the user guide. Because when it comes to reading ROMs and writing save files, you don't want to mess it up because you could end up corrupting your saves, and you don't want to do that. Now, when I purchased this device, I also purchased an NES to SNES adapter because you need to plug this adapter into the SNES slot in order to read your original Nintendo cartridges. And there are adapters for other game systems as well, but NES was the one that I was primarily focused on wanting to get the extra adapter for because I have a decent collection of NES games that I do want to preserve using this device. And the other thing I ordered from this company are some cartridge covers because I didn't want to leave the cartridge slots on this device exposed when I'm storing it. And they just slip right over the cartridge slots and they look 3D printed, but they do the job. And they even cut out a little heart on the left side of the cover to symbolize their logo. So, really cool stuff. So, I want to start with this copy of Pokemon Emerald I just picked up from one of my coworkers who was selling it. And I have been looking for a copy of Pokemon Emerald for a long time, so first thing I want to do is test this game because I'm pretty sure the internal clock battery is dead on this device. So we're going to test this on a Game Boy Advance SP that's been modded with an IPS screen. And sure enough, as soon as I boot it up, the game boots up right away, but we get that message that the internal battery has run dry. And there is a save file on this device from the person I bought it from. So I would say let's try to get this save file. And we'll copy the ROM data onto an SD card before I send this device out to get the battery replaced. So let's go ahead and plug our Pokemon Emerald copy right into the Game Boy Advance slot. And then from there, we follow the directions on the device in order to hit the correct switches. So on the side here, we're going to make sure the voltage switch is set to 3 volts. And we don't need any other settings to be turned on here, so we could just go ahead and turn them off. And then we'll go ahead and use a micro USB to USB port, and we will give this power. And once you turn it on, you find out that everything here is powered by one tiny little screen on the bottom left, as well as 2 buttons, a toggle and a confirm button. So we're reading a Game Boy cartridge, so let's scroll down to Game Boy, and then we're going to hit confirm, and then go down to Game Boy Advance. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and let it search the database that's on the SD card. And once it recognizes the game, it's going to tell you the cart ID, the ROM size, the save size, and we can go ahead and just click Read ROM here. And there's a few other options: read save, write save, force save type, flash repro. This is how you can actually overwrite one of those reproduction cartridges that are out there, which I don't recommend you do. Don't be that person. But let's go ahead and read the ROM, and it's just going to automatically read the cartridge. And this will take a few minutes. Don't touch it. Let it do its thing. Go use the bathroom, grab a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice. I actually ripped all of my Game Boy Advance games in between checking on dinner and cooking. And when you see the file name on the bottom left, that shows that it has completed reading the ROM and it has saved it to the SD card. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to read the save file that I showed you earlier. So we're going to go back to the cart reader screen, and we're just going to go ahead and go to read save. And that process is a lot quicker. It only takes a couple of seconds, and then when you see done and press button, you could go ahead and shut this off. And we're going to pull the SD card out, plug it into the computer, and see what we get. Now, the SD card they provide you is a generic 4GB SD card with a picture of Bart Simpson on it. And this corrupted almost immediately after I filmed this footage. Luckily, I was able to pull the files I needed off of the GitHub page. and put them on a brand new SD card. However, I recommend the first thing you do before using this device, should you purchase one, would be to take this Bart Simpson SD card and immediately back everything up. Now, here on the computer, if we go right into the micro SD card, you'll notice there's a GBA folder, and that GBA folder has a ROM and a save section. And here is our copy of Pokemon Emerald, and here is actually a text file of the log that the device recorded when it read our files. And here is a copy of the save. Now, it's saved in an FLA format, so we're going to go ahead and copy this to our downloads folder, and we're going to do the same thing with the ROM, and I'm going to show you what to do in order to get that save to be recognized on an emulation station device. And it's actually super easy to do. All you have to do is take that FLA file and make sure that it has the exact same file name as your ROM. And you can also change the extension itself from FLA to either SAV or SRM, depending on what emulator core you're using. I'm using SRM because that is the file format that is recognized by MGBA. And so what I did was I dusted off my RG351P, which is a retro device that I haven't used in a good long time, but is fantastic for Game Boy Advance emulation because of the 3x2 screen. And I wiped the SD card and I flashed Jellos onto it, and I put this copy of Pokemon Emerald right onto the RG351P. And sure enough, this is the same save file that was on that official cartridge. So this cartridge reader can take your official games and it can rip both of the cartridge data and the save data, and it will make them a ROM and a readable save file that you can actually use on a retro handheld device without illegally downloading anything. And then if you take a look over here at the clock, you'll notice that the system time on the game actually matches the real world time that's programmed into RetroArch. And so not only am I able to actually play this game while I'm waiting for the battery to get replaced on my official cartridge, I can play it with the real-time clock working. And so I promised my coworker that I would level up her team and I would actually beat this game for her because she never had a chance to do so when she was a child. And then I'll ultimately take her Pokemon and I will transfer them over to Scarlet and Violet when that gets home support. So not only have I preserved her childhood save, but I have also preserved Pokemon that are almost 20 real-world years older so that I can use them in more current games. And you can't tell me that in this day and age that that's not awesome. So now let's try SNES. Here's a copy of Tetris and Dr. Mario that's seen better days. But I went ahead and cleaned the contacts off camera. They were black, black, black. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to put this on the cartridge reader next. And same deal here. We'll select Super Nintendo, and then we'll hit confirm, and then we'll select Super Nintendo again. And then it's going to go ahead and search the database and try to find this game. And here it is, Tetris Dr. Mario. And it gives all the information that you need. So now let's go ahead and click Read ROM. And it does go ahead and read the cartridge. But when it ran the checksum at the end, it did give me an unusual error. And it did say not found. Now, this is not a big deal. This, I believe, just means that there was an error not finding the game in the database. But I confirmed the game worked before I put it in the cartridge reader, so we'll see what happens in testing. And then we're going to go ahead and pull the ROM and the save file over this copy of Super Mario RPG I picked up earlier in the year. And I haven't had time to test this game yet. I just made sure it was working, but I didn't check to see if there was a save file on it, so we're going to find out today. So in similar fashion, I went ahead and plugged the SD card back into my computer, and there was an SNES folder with the ROMs and the save file for Super Mario RPG and the ROM file for Tetris and Dr. Mario. along with the log files from when it carried out the process. And so I thought to myself, what would be a good device that had a 4x3 screen that I would be able to use to test Super Nintendo games? So I went ahead and opened up the Anbernic RG353P that's been sitting in the box since I got it because I haven't had time to open this up and review it. And I chose this device specifically because of the 4x3 aspect ratio screen, and also because it is shaped exactly like a Super Nintendo controller. So what better to test Super Nintendo ROMs than on a device that looks like a Super Nintendo controller? And I also went ahead and put the screen protector on, and then I realized after the fact that I have a sticker from Sakura Retro Mod coming, so I'm probably going to end up taking the screen protector off anyways. Believe it or not, none of my Anbernic devices have screen protectors on. I always mess them up and end up just taking them off and throwing them away, so I'm not too terribly worried about taking this one off too. And so I went ahead and flashed Jellos to this device as well, and you could see both games are represented here on the screen. And so let's go ahead and boot up Super Mario RPG to see what happens. And sure enough, the ROM file boots right up, and we can get right into the title screen here. And let's check to see if the save file transferred over. And sure enough, I bought this game used, and there is a save file here, and the person didn't get very far in the game, but he actually did get to Bandit's Way, so I can actually, for the first time in this channel, show off gameplay of Super Mario RPG that isn't Bowser's Castle from the beginning. And Super Mario RPG really is one of those games that does stand the test of time. The gameplay still holds up even in 2022. And it looks really amazing on the RG353P. This is a great device to consume Super Nintendo content. And despite the error messages that I got when reading the Tetris and Dr. Mario cartridge, everything did transfer over properly, and the game is also now playable on the Anbernic RG353P or whatever retro device I decide to put this on. And so what I'm going to do with this device, and I'll do a video on it in the future, is I'm going to take all of my SNES and NES games, and I'm going to use this device strictly only for 4x3 content. I'm not going to do PSP or Game Boy Advance, even though this device is capable of it, because I want to save this device specifically for 4x3 screens, and I think it'll be really cool to have a device that looks like a Super Nintendo and have it play mostly Super Nintendo games. And so the last thing we're going to try here is reading a Nintendo cartridge using the SNES to NES adapter. And the first thing I want to make sure that you are aware of is that the adapter is labeled with a front and a back, so you just want to make sure you actually put this in properly. And the only way I bring it up is because I was a dum-dum at first and I put this in backwards and then I couldn't figure out why it was working. But once it is plugged in properly, you're going to go to Add-ons, Consoles, and then NES Famicom. And then again, it's going to go ahead and search the database. And then once it finds the game, it's going to give you all the relevant information. It's going to give you the game title. It's also going to give you the mapper, PRG size, CHR size, and RAM size. And that's important because you need to have that information in case you need to manually make changes. But for now, we're just going to let it read the ROM, and sure enough, it's going to do so pretty quickly, and you're going to have a copy of your NES game backed up. So we're going to load this into the RG353P as well and see how it performs. And here it is. Here is an official backup of a physical copy of an old retro game playing on a retro device. And I know there are other ways I was able to access this ROM file in the past, but actually having it be an official backup of my childhood cartridge just feels kind of different. I know it's the same game and it plays the same way, but something about knowing that this is my copy playing on this device is somewhat special. And so I made my RG351P a museum of my physical game collection that I can actually play these games on. And that's really cool for several reasons. It lets me breathe new life into an older device that a time ago was one of the best retro handhelds on the market. And it also lets me play my physical game collection legally, well, maybe pseudo-legally, without having to put physical wear and tear on my already dated video game cartridges. And so if it weren't for efforts like these to preserve these old video games, they would be lost to time. So it's really phenomenal in this day and age that we have ways to read and preserve our old game cartridges. And I'll provide a link in the video description if this is something that you want to pick up for yourself. And let me know what you think in the comments below, and let me know your thoughts on the importance of video game preservation. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And if this video was helpful to you in any way, please be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.